Tucked away in a quiet corner of a small town in Colorado, 67-year-old Michael Jennings sat on the porch of his cabin, gazing across the wide valley where the grass rolled in waves under the evening wind. His face, weathered from time and experience, wore a mixture of calm and quiet sorrow. To anyone passing by, Michael looked like just another old man enjoying his retirement. But inside his heart beat the lessons of a lifetime. Some learned the hard way, others too late. Michael had once been a sharp young philosophy major at Stanford. He was bright, curious, and filled with questions about life, truth, and meaning. While most of his peers were busy securing internships and building resumes, Michael spent long nights in the university library, poring over the works of thinkers like Plato, Kierkegaard, and Nietzsche. It was Nietzsche's writings that had struck him the most. "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how," the German philosopher once wrote. Michael had scribbled that quote into every notebook he owned. But for all the inspiration and mental stimulation Nietzsche gave him in his 20s, it took a lifetime for those lessons to truly sink in. Now, in the golden dusk of his life, Michael felt the heavy irony of his story. He had once memorized the words, studied the logic, and argued the meaning, yet he had failed to apply the wisdom when it mattered most. He often thought, what if I had really lived by those lessons? Could I have avoided the regrets that now sit beside me like old friends I never invited? Back in his college days, Michael was full of ideals. He believed in love that transcended the ordinary, in work that ignited the soul, and in dreams too wild to tame. After graduation, he fell in love with a woman named Claire Thompson. Claire was smart, passionate, and radiated the kind of warmth that made everyone want to be near her. They spent hours talking about philosophy, literature, and their plans for the future. They were both ambitious but in very different ways. Claire wanted to start a non-profit that would bring education to underserved communities. Michael wanted to teach and write, but only once he had the perfect thesis, the perfect argument, the perfect life plan. One of Nietzsche's key teachings is the importance of creating your own values, of becoming who you are. Michael had read that line 100 times. But instead of embracing the courage it demanded, he had postponed decisions and overthought everything. While Claire leaped into life with energy and purpose, Michael hesitated. He turned down job offers, backed out of starting a book project, and eventually hesitated one too many times with Claire. She left for Boston to pursue her dream. Michael let her go, telling himself it was for the best. Deep down he feared failing her, or worse, failing himself. Years went by. Michael took a teaching job at a small college in Oregon. He gave lectures on Nietzsche and existentialism to students who often didn't quite care. He smiled when they quoted Nietzsche like he once did, confident that life would unfold just as they imagined. He didn't blame them. He only wished someone had shaken him by the shoulders when he was their age and said, "Stop theorizing and start living." Nietzsche warned against living an unexamined, shallow life dictated by the expectations of others. "Become who you are," he said. "Not who your parents expect, not what society applauds, but your truest self." Michael didn't fully understand that until he turned 50 and realized he didn't know who he truly was anymore. He had spent so long performing the role of a smart academic, so long trying to avoid mistakes, that he had missed his chance to take meaningful risks. Looking back, he remembered a moment that could have changed everything. He was offered a sabbatical and a publishing deal when he was 35. It was a rare opportunity to travel, write, and live fully in the ideas he loved. But he declined. The uncertainty frightened him. The salary was modest. The pressure was high. And so, he stayed in his comfort zone, teaching the same classes, giving the same lectures, and convincing himself that he was choosing security over chaos. But deep down he knew, it was fear disguised as logic. Nietzsche taught that suffering was a necessary ingredient of growth. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Michael had always liked that quote. But in his younger years, he believed growth would come through thought alone, not through discomfort, risk, or pain. It wasn't until he faced real adversity that he saw the truth in Nietzsche's words. When his father passed away, Michael returned home to Colorado to care for his aging mother. In those years, stripped of his academic identity, far from lecture halls and libraries, Michael was forced to engage with life in its rawest form. There was no time for philosophical detachment when you were helping someone die. That experience broke something in him and built something too. It taught him that intellectual understanding is nothing without human experience. It made him reflect on the hollowness of the life he had built. He had books, theories, and accolades, but no wife, no children, and very few real memories. It was during those lonely Colorado nights, sitting by the fire, that Michael reread Nietzsche, not as a scholar, but as a human being trying to make sense of his time left. And the words hit differently. They weren't abstract concepts anymore. They were urgent truths. The importance of purpose. The power of embracing suffering. The need to live authentically, dangerously, and courageously. At 58, Michael made the boldest move of his life. He quit his job, sold most of his belongings, and bought the cabin he now lived in. He started writing, not for publishers, not for academic journals, but for himself. He wrote letters to his younger self, stories about Claire, reflections on every lesson he had once known but never lived. He wrote as if trying to redeem the decades he had let slip away. One day, a former student named Emily visited him. She was in her early 30s, burned out from a tech job in the city, and searching for meaning. She remembered Michael's classes, the passion in his voice, and the fire in his eyes when he quoted Nietzsche. She asked him bluntly, "If you could go back to your 30s, what would you do differently?" Michael looked at her for a long time before answering. "I would love more fearlessly. I would work with more urgency. I'd stop waiting for perfection. And I'd live for what sets my soul on fire, not what looks good on paper." You think you have time. But time slips through your fingers while you're busy overthinking your next step. They spent the afternoon talking, and Michael shared the very wisdom he wished someone had given him, earnestly, vulnerably, and without pretense. It wasn't academic anymore. It was real. He told her that Nietzsche's greatest lesson wasn't about despair or cynicism. It was about responsibility. The responsibility to make your life your own, to say yes to the challenge of existence, even when it hurts. Emily left with tears in her eyes. A year later, she sent him a postcard from Spain, where she was working with a non-profit that helped young women escape domestic abuse. "I finally did something that scared me," she wrote. "Thank you." Michael read that card at least a dozen times. It reminded him that though he hadn't always lived wisely, he could still pass the lessons forward. Maybe that was the point. Maybe his mistakes, his regrets, and